To the uninitiated, it looks like a mistake. A dark, trembling jelly buried in the mud that smells dangerously like ammonia. But this isn't a rotten egg. It is a masterpiece of preservation that proves time isn't an enemy, but the most important ingredient of all. The century egg legend says, a farmer discovered these by accident centuries ago, finding duck eggs buried in a slurry of clay and ash near his home. Instead of throwing them away, he peeled one open and found that time had transformed it. By coating fresh eggs in a careful mix of clay, wood ash, salt, and tea leaves, the Chinese found a way to stop time without a single volt of electricity. Inside that muddy, crusty shell, a slow, alkaline magic trick takes place. Over weeks or even months, the proteins harden and the chemistry shifts. The egg white turns into a translucent amber jelly, and the yolk becomes a dark, creamy green with rings of color like the inside of a tree. It smells earthy, intense, and strange to the modern nose, but the flavor is rich, complex, and deeply savory. When sliced and served with pickled ginger, it offers a silky, cooling texture that feels like a delicacy. Today we panic when food sits out for more than an hour, but this ancient method proves that with the right knowledge, preservation can create flavors fresh foods simply cannot match. The century egg is a quiet reminder that time is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the artist. The salted duck egg. While the century egg is dark and mysterious, this one is its golden counterpart. A simple duck egg that, when cured properly, hides a center that glows like the setting sun. On the outside, the shell looks completely ordinary, cool and pale to the touch. But the Chinese have known for centuries that salt and time can unlock a secret hidden within the yolk. Families would traditionally pack these eggs in large earthenware jars, filled with a thick paste of charcoal, clay, and salt, or submerge them in a heavy brine solution. Over the course of a month, the salt slowly travels through the porous shell, curing the egg from the inside out without any cooking involved. The result is nothing short of magic. When boiled and cracked open, the white becomes firm and sharply salty, but the yolk transforms into a rich, oily sphere that looks like molten gold. It has a distinct sandy texture that melts in your mouth, bringing a savory, buttery depth to a bowl of plain rice porridge that a regular egg simply cannot provide. It was a brilliant way to preserve protein long before refrigerators hummed in every kitchen. But more than that, it turned a basic ingredient into a luxury. In a modern world of bland, mass-produced food, the salted duck egg is a vibrant, golden reminder that patience yields the richest rewards. The aged mandarin peel, chenpi. In most modern kitchens, orange peels are garbage, tossed into the bin without a second thought. But there was a time when throwing away a peel was considered throwing away medicine. For Chinese families, the skin of the mandarin orange was just as valuable as the sweet fruit inside. Grandmothers would carefully peel the fruit in 3 neat petals and lay them out on bamboo trays or windowsills to bake in the sun. They were not just drying them, they were aging them. As the years passed, the bright orange skin would turn dark, almost black and hard as wood. This is chenpi. The longer it ages, the more potent it becomes. The citrus oils concentrate, losing their bitterness and gaining a deep, warm aroma that smells like spice and history. Some batches aged for 50 years or more fetch prices higher than gold by weight, literally thousands of dollars for a jar of dried peels. It was not just a collector's item, though. It was a practical pantry staple used to soothe a cough, settle an upset stomach, or add a profound depth to a slow-cooked red bean soup. It was a lesson in resourcefulness, proof that value is not always about what you buy, but what you save. Today we are quick to discard what looks like waste, but the aged mandarin peel teaches us that, with a little sunlight and time, even the simplest scraps can become a treasure. The hanging sausage, lap cheong. Long before reliable refrigeration, winter did not mean going without meat. It meant looking up at the rafters to see rows of red sweet sausages drying in the cold air. In the weeks leading up to the Lunar New Year, families would transform fresh pork into lap cheong. This was not the gray soft sausage found in modern supermarkets. This was a craft. Chopped meat was mixed with generous amounts of fat, sugar, salt, and a splash of rose wine, then stuffed into casings and hung up by strings. The cold, dry winter wind acted as a natural refrigerator, slowly drawing out the moisture until the sausages turned a deep, festive red and felt firm to the touch. They looked almost like edible decorations strung up across the courtyard. Because they were cured, they did not need ice or electricity to stay safe. They just needed air. When sliced and steamed on top of a pot of rice, the fat would render out, coating every grain in a sweet, savory glaze that smelled unmistakably like home. Today, we buy meat in sterile plastic packages that expire in days, but the hanging sausage was a promise of security. It was proof that with the right preparation, you could carry the warmth of a feast through the coldest days of the year. The paper-thin meat, bak kwa. If the hanging sausage was a winter necessity, this next delicacy was pure celebration. It looks like thin sheets of amber glass shimmering under the light, sweet, smoky, and dangerously addictive. This is bak kwa, a dried meat that bridges the gap between survival food and pure indulgence. Centuries ago, before refrigeration, travelers and merchants needed meat that could survive long journeys without spoiling. The solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Pork was sliced paper-thin, marinated in a rich blend of sugar, soy sauce, and spices, and then air-dried until it was stable. But the real magic happened over the fire. Vendors would grill these seasoned squares over glowing charcoal, the sugar sizzling and caramelizing until the edges charred. The surface glistened with oil. The smell of roasting bak kwa is the scent of the Lunar New Year for millions, drifting through crowded markets and signaling that good fortune is on the way. It is a cross between jerky and candy, chewy and tender all at once. While we treat it as a luxury gift today, often queuing for hours to buy a box, its roots are humble. It is a delicious reminder that food made for survival can also be food made for joy, turning a simple preservation technique into a festive masterpiece. The fermented crock, mustard greens. Every old kitchen had one, a heavy earthenware jar tucked in a cool, dark corner. It did not look like much, often dusty and covered with a simple cloth, but inside, plain mustard greens were being transformed into something electric. Fresh mustard greens are notoriously tough and bitter, the kind of vegetable most children push to the side of the plate. But farmers knew that with a little salt and a lot of pressure, they could turn that toughness into strength. They would pack the chopped leaves into crocks, weighing them down with heavy river stones. Inside that dark environment, a natural alchemy took place. The salt drew out the water, and fermentation broke down the fibrous stalks, replacing the bitterness with a deep, savory crunch. This was not just about making pickles. It was about survival. In the depths of winter, when fresh vegetables were impossible to find, these fermented greens provided essential nutrients and a burst of flavor that could wake up the blandest bowl of rice. It was a humble staple, born of necessity. Today we buy mass-produced jars that taste mostly of vinegar and preservatives, and the old stoneware crocks sit empty in antique shops. We have gained convenience, but we have lost the art of the family ferment, forgetting that the best flavor comes not from a factory, but from the slow, living process of time in a clay jar. The emergency tin, fried dace. This one is not ancient pottery, it is a humble tin can. But for generations of families, especially those living far from home, the sound of this can opening was the sound of survival. It looks industrial, small, and unassuming, often tucked away in the back of the pantry. But open it, and you unleash a scent that is rich, savory, and timeless. This is fried dace with salted black beans, and it is practically indestructible. It began in the coastal regions where fishermen faced long, perilous journeys at sea. Without refrigerators, they needed a way to keep their catch edible for months. Their answer was to deep fry the fish until it was dry and chewy, then seal it in a tin with savory oil and fermented black beans. The result was a preservation miracle. The fish absorbs the intense, umami flavor of the beans, creating a salty, smoky punch that can turn a bowl of plain white rice into a satisfying feast. It became the ultimate emergency food, the dinner you ate when the weather was bad or money was tight. Today we have endless delivery options at our fingertips, but there is still a special comfort in this little tin. It is a reminder that no matter how empty the fridge is, if you have this and some rice, you have a meal that tastes like home. The ancient salt, fermented black beans. Before soy sauce was a bottle sitting on a supermarket shelf, flavor came from these tiny, wrinkled black specks. They do not look like much, shriveled, dry, and practically lifeless. But do not be fooled. These are flavor bombs waiting to explode. Known as duchi, these fermented black soybeans are the ancestors of modern soy sauce and miso. Thousands of years ago, long before chemical flavor enhancers existed, farmers discovered that by salting black soybeans and leaving them to ferment under the sun, they transformed into something magical. The process turned a bland bean into a concentrated nugget of pure umami. You do not eat them by the handful. That would be overwhelming. Instead, you use them like a secret weapon. Just a pinch, rinsed and maybe mashed with a bit of garlic, is enough to season an entire plate of steamed spare ribs or stir-fried bitter melon. They provide a savory, earthy depth that salt alone cannot achieve. Today we are used to pouring flavor out of a plastic bottle, but these little beans are a reminder of the old ways. They teach us that big flavor does not need a factory. It just needs salt, soybeans, and the patience to let nature do the work. The sun-dried shiitake. If you look at them in the jar, they look like shriveled, cracked leather. To the untrained eye, they seem like unappealing fossils of the forest. But these mushrooms are proof that sometimes, to get the best flavor, you have to take the water out. In the days before refrigeration, a successful mushroom hunt was a race against the clock. Fresh fungi spoil in days, turning slimy and unusable. To make them last through the lean winter months, villagers would string shiitakes up by their stems and hang them from the eaves to bake in the autumn sun. But the sun did more than just dry them. It transformed them. The drying process concentrates the natural flavors, breaking down proteins into glutamates, the compounds that create that rich, savory taste we call umami. While a fresh shiitake is soft and subtle, a dried one is intense, smoky, and meaty. When you drop them into a bowl of hot water, the kitchen fills with a deep, earthy aroma that feels like the forest floor coming back to life. A profound, almost mystical scent. Even the soaking water becomes a golden broth, a liquid seasoning that chefs treasure as much as the mushroom itself. Today we obsess over fresh produce, assuming fresh always equals better. But the dried shiitake challenges that. It teaches us that sometimes you have to lose a little moisture to gain a lot of soul. The forest ear, wood ear fungus. It grows silently on trees in the deep forest, looking more like a shadow than food. To the uninitiated, it looks strange, dark, rubbery, and oddly shaped like a human ear. But dry it out, and this peculiar fungus becomes a pantry staple that can sleep for years without losing its soul. Wood ear fungus is a marvel of nature's own packaging. When harvested, it is soft and pliable, but after a few days in the sun, it shrinks into hard, brittle shards that look like bits of black paper. You could store a sack of it in a dry pantry for a decade, and it would never spoil. But the moment it touches warm water, the magic happens. It blooms, swelling to 5 times its dried size, returning to its original, glossy state as if it were harvested that morning. Unlike the shiitake, which is prized for its deep flavor, the wood ear is treasured for its unique bite, a texture that is somehow both crunchy and gelatinous at the same time. It acts as a sponge, absorbing the sauce of whatever it is cooked with. For centuries, families believed it helped cleanse the blood and clear the lungs, a medicine cabinet growing on a tree stump. In a world of complex processing and artificial preservatives, the wood ear reminds us that the best way to keep food is often to simply let the air do the work. The red diamond, goji berries. Long before superfoods became a marketing trend, grandmothers were sprinkling these tiny red gems into soups and teas. They were not following a fad. They were following a tradition, known as wolfberries or goji berries. These bright red fruits have been a staple of Chinese pantries for over 2,000 years. Legend says that monks in the mountains ate them to sharpen their eyesight and even claimed they could live to 100. For many, they are a mystical link to longevity. Because the fresh berries are delicate and crushed easily, drying them was the only way to keep them. Under the sun, they shrink into hard, wrinkled jewels that are tough enough to survive anywhere. But when you toss them into hot water or broth, they soften and swell, releasing a subtle sweetness and turning a vibrant orange red. It was a simple way to add nutrition and color to a plain bowl of porridge during the drab winter months. Today, we buy them in expensive pouches as a trendy health hack, but we often forget their humble roots. They are a reminder that real wellness is not about the latest craze, but about the simple, enduring power of nature preserved. The natural sweetener, dried red dates. In a time before refined white sugar was a staple in every cupboard, sweetness came from a wrinkled red fruit that looked like it had seen better days. But looks can be deceiving. Known as the jujube or red date, this humble fruit has been the heart of Chinese kitchens for thousands of years. When fresh, it is crisp and green like a small apple. But the real value comes when it is left to dry in the sun. The skin turns a deep crimson, and the flesh becomes spongy and chewy, locking in a natural sugar that tastes like caramel and honey. This was not just a snack, it was a source of warmth. In traditional Chinese medicine, red dates are believed to nourish the blood and calm the spirit. Mothers would simmer them in ginger tea or chicken soup, filling the house with a sweet, soothing aroma that felt like a hug on a cold day. It was a way to add sweetness to life without the crash of processed sugar. Today we grab candy bars for a quick fix that leaves us empty. But the red date remains a symbol of a different kind of energy, one that is sustained and restorative, proving true sweetness comes with natural age. The dragon's eye, dried longan. It is a close cousin to the lychee, but when dried, it turns into a small, dark marble that rattles in your hand. They call it the dragon's eye, and for weary travelers centuries ago, this was not just a snack, it was pure, portable energy. When fresh, the fruit is pale, juicy, and delicate, spoiling within days of being picked. But dry it slowly over a fire or under the hot sun, and the flesh turns into a dense, translucent amber that clings to the seed. The flavor changes entirely, deepening from a light, floral sweet to a rich, smoky caramel taste that lingers on the tongue. In traditional Chinese culture, this dried fruit is considered warm, a restorative ingredient used to rebuild strength after illness or childbirth. Today we rely on caffeine and synthetic vitamins for a sharp jolt of energy, but the dried longan is a quieter, steadier source of strength. It is the original, wholesome energy bar, carried in pockets and brewed into hot tonics to ward off the winter chill. Families would simmer it with red dates to create a sweet soup that felt like liquid comfort. It is proof that sweetness can be substantial, serving a purpose beyond just taste. But even the land cannot provide everything, which is why the ancients turned to the ocean for this next preservation miracle. The ocean's ribbon, dried seaweed. The ocean is unpredictable, offering feasts one day and famine the next. But coastal families found a way to tame its volatility. They pulled long, slippery ribbons of kelp from the heavy waves and laid them out on the rocks to let the sun do its work. What started as a perishable plant transformed into stiff, dark sheets that looked more like dried parchment than food. This is dried seaweed, and for centuries, it was the backbone of coastal survival. The drying process locks in the ocean's minerals and creates a natural seal of salt, allowing the seaweed to be stored in simple jars for years without spoiling. It looks brittle and lifeless, but toss a piece into a pot of boiling water, and it miraculously returns to its original form, soft, glossy, and green. It releases a rich, savory broth that smells unmistakably of the sea breeze, turning plain water into a nourishing soup in minutes. We often rely on processed stock cubes for quick flavor today, but dried seaweed is the original instant soup, pure and unadulterated. It is a lesson in using nature's abundance to prepare for the lean times. But while the sea provides the savory base, our final treasure provides the spirit, a liquid gold stored in clay jars that only gets better with age. The liquid gold, Shaoxing wine. We end our list not with something you chew, but something you sprinkle. Deep in the cellars of the ancient city of Shaoxing, clay jars are stacked row upon row, filled with rice, water, and wheat. They sit in the dark for years, sometimes decades, slowly transforming into the amber liquid known as Shaoxing wine. This is not just alcohol, it is the soul of the Chinese kitchen. When a chef splashes a ladle of this wine into a hot wok, it sizzles and evaporates instantly, leaving behind a rich, nutty aroma that defines the taste of restaurant-style stir-fries. It cuts through the grease of pork and neutralizes the fishiness of seafood, balancing the dish with a complexity that salt and soy sauce alone cannot provide. But its true value lies in its age. In traditional families, a jar might be buried when a daughter is born and carefully dug up only on her wedding day 20 years later. A taste held hostage by time. It is a flavor that literally grows up with you, connecting the past to the present with every deep, rich drop. It is the ultimate proof that the most essential ingredient in any kitchen is not found in a packet or a bottle, but in the willingness to wait. From the century egg to the vintage wine, these foods remind us that if you give nature enough time, it will always give you something extraordinary in return. In a fast-paced world, these ancient flavors remind us that the best things in life are worth waiting for. If you want to keep rediscovering the lost wisdom of the past with us, please like this video and subscribe for our next journey.